Happiness and ethics. Very often, when people talk about religion or religious practice, they use the expression religion and ethics. The development of happiness is inextricably linked to improving one's life, to improving society, and to developing other aspects of spiritual practice. In this context, it is necessary to state that the development of happiness is equivalent to the development of ethics, and conversely, ethical development is equivalent to the cultivation of happiness. If one can understand this connection, then one will understand the true meaning of both ethics and of happiness. When people hear the word ethics or morality, they often get the sense of acting against one's will. For example, when speaking about ethics, people often think of needing to refrain from certain harmful or evil behavior, which gives the sense of force or constraint. In truth, ethical development is one aspect of developing happiness. True ethics belong to the ethics of happiness. If ethics is merely a system of going against one's will or is tied up with suffering, then it is not true ethics. It will not lead to true success. This is not to say that ethics does not involve some form of constraint and self-control. It does involve constraint, of which there are two kinds. Early stages of practice may involve some constraint, in the same way that positive growth may require the removal of negative qualities. Yet when one enters the correct path and one's ethical conduct is true, growth is unhindered. Negative qualities fall away and one need not spend time removing them. Positive qualities increase to the state of completion, at which point one's life is fully devoted to sharing goodness with others. B. The second form of constraint is related to personal disposition. There are some people referred to as engaging in difficult, arduous practice, dukkha patipada, whose disposition it is to be forceful in practice, yet their willingness and eagerness for constraint leads to self-discipline. Instead of suffering about constraint, they delight in training. They have the potential to grow and succeed. Ethics overlaps with spiritual training. According to the Buddha's teachings, human beings require spiritual training. They only reach excellence and nobility by way of training. Spiritual training is equivalent to spiritual development. People reach spiritual success by way of training themselves. This is an aspect of human nature. One cannot progress by simply following one's raw instincts. For this reason, one can see that spiritual training is linked to human nature. People can only grow and prosper by engaging in spiritual training. If spiritual training unfolds correctly, it must be endowed with happiness, and it must be a training of happiness. If people are unhappy while engaging in such practice, it can be assumed that they are not training correctly. When people engage in spiritual training, their lives undergo development and increase in virtue and wholesomeness. This life of virtue and rectitude is referred to as ethical conduct, Kariya Dhamma. Ethics and spiritual training thus must go hand in hand. In fact, one need not use the term must here, because when people practice correctly, these two elements naturally proceed in unison. When people engage in correct spiritual training, their lives improve and they experience greater happiness. Spiritual training is thus a cultivation in happiness. Moreover, every aspect of a person's life will be developed. It is in this way that these factors are connected. Spiritual training is the development of happiness. Spiritual training is equivalent to ethical development. Development of ethics is the cultivation of happiness, etc. It is, as the Buddha said, if one attends to the correct causes and conditions, one need not make an appeal. The dynamics of nature will proceed automatically. When rapture, piety, arises, the body and mind are refreshed and relaxed. One need not ask with this to happen, or even to have this intention. Relaxation, passaddhi, then follows naturally, according to things being just so. If a mother hen wishes for chicks to hatch, she incubates the eggs. At the proper time, the chicks peck through the eggshell and emerge. Yet if the hen does not sit on the eggs, despite clucking loudly all day in front of the coop, her efforts will be in vain. The eggs will rot and no chicks will appear. Soon after the Second World War, technology was not as advanced as it is today. And before people could get in a car and drive away, they would have to use all their strength to turn the hand crank. Sometimes they would be utterly exhausted by the time the engine turned over. Nowadays, however, one only needs to turn one's fingers an inch on the ignition and the engine starts. Here we see both the connection and the distinction between the human processes and the processes of nature. If we are to benefit from the process of nature, then we must seek ways for them to complement human activities. The amount of strain and difficulty we experience depends on how well we can link our activities to natural processes and have these take over for us. If people are able to set up their activities effectively and to link them with dynamics of nature, they will abide in joy and at ease. And if people can accomplish this, they will not have to act against their will. There will be no need for other people or for the government to exert pressure on them to act. Our responsibility is simply to discern causes and conditions, to then respond to them correctly. We need neither appeal to things to be a specific way nor to resist them. There are some people who, rather than resist the processes of nature, try to regulate their desires. They wholeheartedly practice self-restraint, and this restraint eventually becomes a form of self-training. This is another natural unfolding. Spiritual training is a way of developing people in happiness and in other virtuous qualities. When they live a virtuous life, they live an ethical life. This is how ethics and training are defined in Buddhism. Here we use the term Buddhism simply as a means for communication. If Buddhism teaches the truth, then it teaches nature. It teaches how things naturally exist. All things exist according to their own nature. A simple definition for Buddhism is this: a teaching of natural truth. In sum, for spiritual training or ethical development to be true and effective, it must include a cultivation of happiness. Spiritual training and ethical development are synonymous with a development of happiness. If spiritual training is still accompanied by a lack of enthusiasm and resistance, one will be unable to experience happiness. This is not genuine training, and its associated ethical discipline will be endowed with force and compulsion. Likewise, this is not true ethical conduct.